Hello and welcome to the BurnCast. I'm Brady Byrne.
And I'm Kim Cass.
Today we're looking at a book called Jaunts of the Mantis by author Jim Henderson. As always, any criticisms directed towards the authors and works that we discuss are exaggerated for entertainment purposes and are not meant to be taken personally. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. Let's talk about Jaunts of the Mantis.
Let's talk about it.
So, I was very excited to read this book when we picked it last week because it's the first time we've really gotten into like a science fiction novel that is kind of similar to what I would read if I wasn't doing this to talk about a bad book or something.
Yeah, I think we are both science fiction fans. I think that it's definitely perhaps my favorite genre of fiction to read. So
yeah,
I have a bias towards the setting and that sort of shit interests me. And a book called Jaunts of the Mantis? I mean, come on, what more do you want? Like, let's go.
Yeah, it really seemed like the perfect thing to get into because Jaunts of the Mantis is essentially your Firefly, Star Trek-inspired adventure in space on a kind of low economic vessel explorer ship, and you get the idea that we're going to go off into space, we're going to have weird, crazy adventures, there's going to be suspense, there's going to be action, maybe a bit of romance. There is some romance in this, but maybe not the kind you'd expect or want to read about necessarily. So we'll get into that. Let's talk about what we read. So it is essentially a adventure story. But I would say the most prominent aspect of this is, in fact, a romance.
Well, actually, I'm going to cut the whole thing short right here and say, Brady, what was the conflict in this story?
I don't know, because
there wasn't any. There was no conflict. There was just, they just jump in and, like, do a couple tasks. And then it's over.
Yeah.
You know, great for setting up a premise, but there has to be some sort of problem or some sort of bad guy or some sort of character development.
Or at least some stakes.
Yeah.
Now, this is called Jaunts of the Mantis because the story is sort of structured in chapters are Jaunt 1, and they go on a mission. Jaunt 2, they go on another mission that's not related. So it is kind of expected that the overarching narrative isn't going to have much tie between these sort of vignette stories.
But I was expecting something.
Yeah, you would think that there would be something of a climactic upturn in each of those jaunts.
Yeah.
And there really isn't.
No, there isn't. It's just, they just do each one thing and nothing from the last jaunt pertains to the next jaunt. And they just seem to, like, come out on top every time. That to me was really disappointing. I don't care how silly the book is or really how badly it's written, but come on, give me something to like vie against or give me a problem or make one of the characters like have some sort of huge flaw that they're all struggling with as they do these jaunts and that by the end they overcome that.
Yeah.
No.
Well, if you look at the main character, his name is Simon with an X. Simon Sabo.
Why can't he just be Simon?
Because, Kim, it's the future. And in the future, people have weird names.
Yeah.
That's what science fiction is, apparently. So, we can talk about disappointment. When I first started reading this, I was kind of worried that this wasn't going to be a funny, bad book, like the ones we usually talk about. I was reading it and I was thinking, this is semi-decent, it's competent, you know. Simon is essentially a middle-aged, retiring lieutenant commander, and he is in the market for receiving his compensation, which is like a scout ship. And he's going to go off and do some odd jobs in the universe to live out his retirement while still having a bit of income. That's your basic premise.
Yes, but I'll stop you there because that is the premise of the story, but it blows up in his face because he explains right in the start that you get this old ship, right? So there's the Federation Exploration Guild or whatever, the KSF.
Yeah.
And so you get an old ship, but they take off 25 or up to 50% of your retirement money. So you're paying for it.
Yeah.
And then you spend your own money fixing it up.
Yeah.
They give him like a broken ship and then he has to spend his own money fixing it up. and then you do work for the Republic. I'm failing to understand how that's a good deal.
He also talks about how there's a big catch, and that if you're awarded one of these ships, your retirement pay is docked as compensation.
That doesn't make sense. Why would you ever do that? Just, I'll take the retirement cash, please.
So this is like a big Republic Empire kind of science fiction story, except the Empire in this one is shit. They are really quite greedy. The people don't like working for them. And you get these sort of Foundation-style encyclopedia entries.
Oh, God.
And they're constant. We've talked before, like in Bucket Full of Bullets, how there's the news reports that are sort of cloaked exposition. It's something attached to the narrative that you can kind of hide your exposition in. Well, it's the same thing here, except, again, the rest of the narration is also just exposition.
Yeah.
So there's no point to having these Wikipedia entries.
No, they're just huge info dumps. And you said before in A Bucket Full of Bullets, they're cloaked. In this, they aren't cloaked. They're just boom, like a wiki dump.
Yeah.
And it's... come on, just give me some form of creative display. You could have him, arguing, and being like, but I don't want this piece of crap, for 25%, I want a little bit more, Yeah. Some sort of action where you're like, oh, wow, the Federation is giving him this, but instead you get this, this is how it is in this world, and it's really deflating. It's it's terrible. There's no other way to say it.
And the encyclopedia entries aren't anything interesting. They're not a way to view this author's particularly interesting and unique sci-fi world. No, it's like encyclopedia entries about shit you've already heard 1,000 times before, like what a jump drive is and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of boring stuff that you've seen 1,000 times before.
Yeah. And as well as picking apart, you can make up rules for your fantasy or science fiction world. And, I'm more than happy to believe in whatever the author wants me to. However, there were some glaring holes that I couldn't, the stupidity of the system that they're in, where they have to give up a large amount of, and then fix it up themselves and continue, that just doesn't make any sense. How is that a good deal for you at all?
Yeah.
And also, they say that the engine is a closed fusion reactor, right? But then they constantly throughout the book, they're needing to dip down into these gas giants to scoop up hydrogen to fuel it.
Yeah, like fuel skimming.
But it's a closed fusion reactor. It doesn't need fuel. I'm sorry, what? You don't just make up a jump drive power source that requires hydrogen. Yeah. Don't give me a real or a theorized one and then tell me it needs. That's not how that works.
Yeah. And we're not saying you need to have all of these details planned out because you could be on the softer spectrum of science fiction.
Yeah.
But this book presents itself as hard sci-fi.
Yeah.
Most of the book is laborious technical information about how long it's going to take to extend the mechanical arm to drop a satellite into orbit, and then they have to wait 17 hours.
Yeah.
It's not quick and dirty and...
No, or flashy.
No, most of this book is the routine of spaceship life.
Yeah. That is what it is. It's the daily slug. It's the grind of, someone in a shitty federation.
Yeah, this is not a story about a retired lieutenant commander who gets a little scout craft
into a crazy mission, yeah.
No, this is a retired man goes and basically drives a tractor through space and does...
Yeah, does daily missions and then pumps loads into his sex bot. That's what...
We cannot leave out the sex bot.
No, it is the main thing in the story. Out of all the things, the one thing that is consistent is the return to the sex bot, and it's so weird how it's presented. Is she fully intelligent? Does she know what's happening? Because if she is fully intelligent, then weird. That is really weird. And if she isn't fully intelligent, then she's just a masturbation toy, and he gets married to it. He gets married to it. What?
Well, we'll get into everything that has to do with the sex bot, because that is really the most important part of this story.
It is the story.
And I'm not being glib. That really is the thing that the story focuses the most on. Now, we've said the premise of this story is that he's a retired lieutenant commander and he's going to go off into space. And you would think that's something that's established in the first couple of pages. But it's the first 20% of this book.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like the first scene is him stepping onto the platform and getting in his ship, and then he's about to go on his venture.
No.
No, you have to scroll through 30-some pages of him setting up the contracts and, I'm going to go look on the job listing board now for some mechanics. And
and there's like 5, no, maybe 9 people I'll send applications out to. And then he gets replies from people and selects 2, and then he narrows it down to 1, and then he gets this lady in, gets her an interview. It's painful. It's so painful.
Yeah, it's pretty painful. It's just terribly laborious stuff. And even if this is like your first science fiction novel you've ever read, it's still painfully boring. Every tiny detail about the ship and the bureaucracy of setting up a contract for going off into space, stocking the equipment.
Yeah.
But none of it's interesting. It's not like this is a unique science fiction world and we have particular space. No, it's just like, he needs a scanner, and he needs, an airlock to be fixed, and just every minor detail.
And this is how much it will cost. It literally gives you like pricings for all the things that he's buying, and they argue it out, and it's just so strange. And on top of that, then you get these funny little quirky moments where he selects the candidate based on the fact that she's an attractive female, and you're like, oh wow, way to top it off,
Yeah, so we need to talk about Simon's view of women, because it's really important for establishing the role that the sex bot plays.
Oh my god.
Because he basically has an interview with this mechanic. Her name is Elsbeth.
Because it couldn't be Elizabeth, right? It couldn't be.
No, it's the future. Their names have to be weird. It says he greeted her and led her up the ramp to the small galley where he had a few images and a few beers and sodas ready. He noted that, though she was 40 plus and certainly over KSF weight standards, Elsbeth was, indeed, moderately attractive. Curvy with long sandy blonde hair. That never hurts, especially when you might be flying with someone for a few weeks or months. He literally picks her because she's moderately attractive to him, and that's a small plus over the qualifications of a much better mechanic.
Yeah. It plays out further into the book, and it's again one of these things where you just think, this is much less a story and much more of just a fantasy of someone's that they are inserting themselves into.
Yeah, this really read to me like a self-insert kind of story where it's the author's wish fulfillment of he reads lots of science fiction novels and watches lots of science fiction movies, and this is his way of escaping into that world and kind of inserting himself in that fantasy.
Yeah.
Because the main character is just a middle-aged man who is somehow like infinitely desirable by both his sex bot and also Elsbeth at some point in the story.
That's where I really question the sex bot. Is it like enslaved to him?
Yeah.
Because it seems to do just anything that he wants and is super like subservient to him.
Well, it's really weird because there are so many times where this sex bot, her name is Reza, and she is constantly just telling Simon, like, oh, I'm just here to serve you. I'm so comforted by your presence.
Yeah.
You're so amazing. You're such a great owner, Simon.
Yeah, it's very strange.
It's very strange because, yeah, we don't know what the level of sentience this robot has. And so when Simon starts to basically fall in love with his sex bot, it's kind of a one-sided deal.
Yeah.
Because he tells her how perfect she is for him, but she is, of course, programmed to be subservient and desirable and appreciative of everything he does.
Yeah.
Now, not only does he use her to relieve sexual frustrations,
but she's also just like a maid.
Yeah.
Like she just cooks and cleans, basically.
Yeah, there are constantly scenes where like, oh, he has sex with Reza and then he leaves her to clean up his room and then she makes them all dinner. It's the most stereotypical womanizing situation you can imagine.
It's just a bang maid, a robotic bang maid.
That's basically what it is.
That's what it is. And the fact that, you know, he falls in love, like, it's like, come on, man, you know?
Yeah.
And don't worry, if you pick up this book and read it, there are plenty of, he goes back to this sex bot maybe like 7 or 8 times in the story.
Yeah. No, more than that. Like every other page. She's a main character. She's not just, oh, he has a sex bot who he returns to every once in a while. She aids them on missions. He constantly tells you how good the food she makes is. But I want to talk about Elsbeth a little more, because she is introduced as sort of the contrast to Simon. She's introduced as like a hardworking mechanic who just wants to get paid and isn't really interested in going on any super crazy adventure. She just wants to do the job and get it done. And then about halfway through the book, the author decided to change her character completely into like a slutty, drunk, annoying, crazy woman who just irritates Simon and turns crazy because she sleeps with him.
You know, and you could have made this book into a real story by having, you know, she's flawed and she has these issues and she's not as perfect as Razor, but the fact that they begin a real friendship and connection and and the fact that it's, you know, difficult, but it's more human and stuff. And then Elsbeth and Simon like fall in love and he ditches the sex bot, you know, over something real.
Yeah, he discovers that the qualities of humans, despite not being perfect, are more valuable than the manufactured perfection of a robot. But it's literally the opposite.
It's literally the opposite, yeah. Elsbeth does not come even close to breaking Simon's mind.
No.
Simon's mind just increases his love for
the sex robot, yeah.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
So he hires on this mechanic, and you would think, again, we're going to get to the story now. You know, he's going to get his crew together. They're going to go on their first mission. But no, it's really like another 40 pages of them setting up the ship. And where is Elsbeth going to room on the ship?
Yeah.
And, oh, you have to replace that airlock. And it's just pages and pages and pages of fixing up this piece of crap spaceship.
You know, she just says like, oh, I'm going to need to get a techie in here. And if you want it done cheap, I can do it like this. And or if you want to spend more money, I can do it like this.
Yeah, we see the whole conversation of them talking about how much he's going to have to pay her and how much it's going to cost to fix everything up. She tells him, well, you can fix these parts up and you're not going to have your ship perfect, but it's enough to fly and go on missions and that sort of thing. So I think it's around like 20% into the book that we get to our first jaunt, our first actual mission.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really where the book should have started.
Yeah.
And you can kind of fill out that context of who Simon is and the situation with the ship. You can fill all that stuff out in dialogue as the story progresses.
Yeah.
Instead of spending 40-some pages explaining it to us. So we go on our first jaunt, and the first mission they go on is essentially
a survey. Well, it starts off as they just have to go survey a planet because there's some anomaly, you know, and it hasn't been surveyed for like 10 years. They go there and discover that it's being terraformed by unknown alien civilization, a less advanced alien civilization.
Yes, so they travel there with their ship, which Simon names the Mantis. And by some coincidence, the aliens they discover are also mantis-like creatures.
Yes.
And the funniest thing about these little missions that he goes on, and we've talked a bit about how nothing seems to happen in this story. There's really no stakes. There's no crazy adventure. It's just kind of routine stuff. But every opportunity to have something interesting or anomalous just turns out to be something like normal and uneventful.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, there's a weird signal coming from that planet. Oh, it's just a satellite.
Yeah.
Oh, we're coming out of hyperspace. Maybe we're going to get jumped by pirates. No, they just come out of hyperspace and it's fine. Every time there's a moment where something could shake up the story, there's just nothing.
I even thought, you know, when they do this first contact and it's like, oh, you know, how do we do this first contact? There's so many different ways that it can go. It just generally plays out as like, there's a little bit of like communication trouble, but they figure it out and then it's all good. They say peace amongst worlds. And then he goes back and they get debriefed by, you know, one of the higher ups. And he's just like, well done, crew. Here's some extra pay.
Yeah. We run into our mantis-like creatures who are of lower intelligence than the humans. And you would think, oh, here's going to be some Star Trek-styled conflict where perhaps there's going to be some disagreement in the way of life and they're going to conflict in some way. The idea that the book gives you is that humans claimed this planet for a mining operation, but the bugs got there and they claimed it because humans weren't using it yet. So they want to use it to hatch their young. And you would think, oh man, this is going to stir up some interstellar conflict, some interspecies disputes. But no, the bugs are just like, oh yeah, can we keep the planet? And Simon's like, yeah, it's fine. Let me just talk to the Federation.
Or yeah, I'll pass you on to the higher ups and then my job is done. And I was really hoping for something like maybe you know, Simon makes a promise that isn't kept by the Federation or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And then maybe the humans just take over the planet and say, you can't. And maybe later on in the book, the bug people come back and said, you promised us, you know, on a sort of revenge curve. But no.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. Nothing happens. Simon brokers peace with the bugs, and the Federation agrees that they can have the planet as long as they don't bother humans on the other planets in the system.
Yeah, the mining facilities.
So you just get like 40 pages of bureaucracy of Simon going back to the board and relaying the scene that you just saw to them.
Yeah, as if we ever need to hear the same scene twice and know that it's uneventful. They literally explain what you just read again, and there's no special twist to their conversation. They're just like, well, good work. I had to really read this with my head in my hands because I couldn't believe that. Why are you writing the same thing twice?
Yeah. And so much of this story is like that. It's so uneventful. And the funniest part about it is the narration often comments on how uneventful things are in the story.
Yeah.
There's so many lines like, then they jumped, and that too was uneventful. The rest of the flight was uneventful.
Because he's just riding up to that next interaction with the sex bot. That's what he really wants to get to.
Yeah, so you would think that something interesting is going to happen on these missions, but they're really so routine. He goes out into space, they find something, he reports on it, and then that's it. It's all clean and everything is good to go.
Yeah.
There's only one or two of the jaunts where something does not go quite as planned, but it still just gets instantly resolved.
Yeah, and then he just hands it off to other people.
Yeah.
Like, he does that with the alien encounter, he does that with the murder and things like that. He just hands it off. Well, I've done my part as the captain.
Yeah.
And I'm going to marry my sex bot now.
Yeah, so let's talk about the sex bot now, because that really is the main part of this story. Like you said, the only continuous part of the story is how much Simon returns to Reza.
Yeah. And how much he loves her, really.
Yeah, he really loves her. She's introduced. He's getting Elsbeth with her contract set up, and he said, yeah, I've got another crew member. She's my companion bot.
Yeah. I also love how, like, he had this lady, the sex bot, from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So it's not as if like he like finds this sex bot and falls in love with her. No, this is just his regular like pump and dump.
He's introducing his mechanic to his ship, and he's like, by the way, I have a sex bot. And Elsbeth is a bit judgmental of Simon for this.
Yeah.
There's lines here. Simon could tell that Elsbeth was assuming that Reza was a sex bot. Reza could and did serve that function at times, but Reza did do some other useful work. She was a true-form service robot, TSR, model, D8 companion bot. She was about 1.6 meters tall, with a small waist, a relatively large bust, a dazzlingly beautiful face with some permanent makeup, and strawberry blonde hair that fell in ringlets when not in a perfect braid. It really gets indulgent with how beautiful she is and how perfect she is.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where we're talking about the kind of wish fulfillment aspect of this story.
You're just a regular space pilot working your grind, and you got your sexy sex bot slave who just pleases your every need and does all your menial tasks for you. And then you also got your co-worker who's also just another female that you can bang. And he does.
Yeah, he does. One night, Elsbeth decides to sleep with him, and you would then think maybe there's going to be some conflict, like we talked about.
Yeah, or maybe he's going to fall in love with her over the sex bot or something.
Elsbeth maybe gets jealous of Reza for being so perfect, and she can't live up to the standards of a perfect robot. None of that happens.
No.
She just doesn't care. She just pokes fun at Simon a little bit.
Yeah. And she does it in this really weird way, which made me question like the intelligence or the consciousness of Reza, because it says, quote, Elsbeth grinned like an idiot and was almost unintelligible with laughter. Well, of course, we simply must keep Reza full of energy and soft and pliable, eh? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. She nudged him in the ribs and really broke down laughter. Now, you're implying that you're going to keep this intelligent or perhaps not intelligent machine as fuckable as possible for your captain.
Yeah. She's not intelligent. Let's be real. There's a point where like Simon like sends Reza out to do something in space. You know, she's on like the tether, and she like gets knocked off and she bumps against the airlock and it's very silly or something happens like that. And when she comes back in, he says, "Are you feeling well?" And Reza says, "Yes, Simon. I do not believe I suffered any damage from yesterday's satellite deployment, and I always feel better after sleeping with you. It brings me great pleasure, and I enjoy being able to care for you." And Simon returns, "Well, Reza, that's a great quality in a woman or anyone. I'm comforted by your presence as well." And it's like this every time they talk.
Yeah.
The very next paragraph, Simon is saying to the bridge that he's going to be up in 30 minutes. Then he notes that Reza was still there, undressed, and fully functional.
Ooh.
And he corrects himself. "Correction, I'll be up in an hour. Please block comm requests unless it's an emergency." And then the next line is Simon left Reza cleaning his quarters and headed up to the bridge happy and well rested. So she is literally just his sex toy who he uses whenever he pleases, and then she cleans up after him and makes him breakfast. Sometimes just making him sandwiches.
Yeah, there's multiple sandwich scenes in this book as well. There multiple times she brings sandwiches or they request sandwiches.
Yeah, it almost seems like a commentary on the stereotype that women are meant to be objectified and make us sandwiches, but that's not treated as a
bad thing. Yeah, no, it's just like literally the best thing that he could hope for is like the sandwich slave.
Yeah, it's treated as, isn't it awesome? I have this super hot robot to fuck and make sandwiches for me.
and I'm sorry, but you know, maybe it's something where like, of course in the future, maybe everyone has a sex bot and that's kosher, but I would feel so uncomfortable if you start a job and your boss that you're going to be basically living with says, "Oh, there's one more person on this is my masturbation toy. Her name is Razor.
Yeah.
And she pleases me sexually and cleans up as well and brings sandwiches." And I mean, wouldn't that make you be like, no? Like, no.
Yeah, you would think Elsbeth might be a bit angered by this. "Oh, it's odd that you objectify women so much." And Simon, you know, I was thinking, because we read so many books with poor characters or very little character development, I was thinking as I was reading this, Simon is the most believable character we've talked about. Because he is just such a consistent asshole. Once he finally sleeps with Elsbeth, because she
gets wasted,
she goes to sleep with him, and then the next morning it says Simon woke up to the sound of gentle snoring next to him and paused to admire the body. And then he concludes that yes, this has probably been a terrible idea, but Elsbeth was an energetic and vocal companion, and it was nice to wake up next to a soft, warm, real body. "Oh well," he concluded, "not much we can do about it now. We'll just have to see what kind of crazy it brings." And then he waits all day for the crazy to hit, the accusations, the blame, etc. Like, he really treats Elsbeth like, "Oh, this is why I fuck my sex robot, because real women are..."
Because she doesn't talk back, you know?
Yeah, because real women have feelings and emotions and fuck all that noise.
Yeah, I don't have time for that. I just want to pump and dump and have them clean up after me and bring me sandwiches. And you're right that it's consistent. And he even makes a comment when he gets the Mantis, and I quote, "He instantly loved her, but was somewhat cautious in his affection. Like getting to know a woman who looked good, but you wondered what kind of baggage she had." It's like, yeah, what? That's not the way you look at women. Like,
yeah, what is this character? And we're supposed to follow this character and enjoy being in his constant company. But the whole time I'm reading this, I'm just thinking, what a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
At some point between their jaunts, Elsbeth is like taking some leave off the ship, and she goes to a bar. And Simon is rushing to this bar to tell her that she's not supposed to talk about the bugs they encountered because it's still too early and the Federation doesn't want that information out. So he rushes to the bar and he's trying to get her out of the bar, but she's wasted. And he finally convinces her to get out. And this is where Elsbeth turns from just being like a regular mechanic character into like a fucking mess.
Yeah, and really unrealistic.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, come with me. I'll buy you a bottle of whatever you want." And Elsbeth is like, no, you're just going to take advantage of me. And she's like, well, either way, take me home, sailor. I'm drunk and need to get naked. That's what she says.
Yeah.
And then the next morning they wake up and Elsbeth says, oh, you took advantage of me, didn't you? And Simon says, no, Elsbeth, I was the perfect gentleman and just kept you company. And she gets offended by this and says, that's even worse. How could you? As if she wanted him to take advantage.
Yeah. And it's really strange because they have this moment where he takes her, and I want you to imagine that you're doing this with a friend of yours or something like that. And this is even worse because they're not really friends yet. They're just co-workers.
Yeah.
And so you find your coworker drunk. You take them back home, which is a nice thing to do. But he doesn't just put her into the bed and sleep on the couch or something like that. No,
he gets in next to her after taking her clothes off.
Yeah, that's not a normal, that's not what you do with someone that's too drunk to operate, that's really, really weird.
Yeah, well, it's not like he really likes her that much anyways, because he's much more happy to sleep with his fuckbot, Reza.
Yeah.
Who, in the very next scene, this is probably the worst line in the book, because it says, he awoke a few hours later and, true to form, Reza had washed all his clothes and laid out fresh ones. She had also made a nice lunch for him in bed. He thanked her. Thank you, Reza. You are a great comfort. And then she says, somewhat sultrily, you are always welcome, Simon. I love to serve you. And this is where it starts to get fucking creepy.
Yes.
Because you know that Simon must know that Reza does not have the capability to not be in love with him. Yet he still falls for her as if she really returns his affections.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, is she really intelligent? Or because why would you ever fall in love with something that, is literally incapable of refusing anything you do or say?
Well, I can understand a character who is somewhat sexually frustrated and can't find love with real people because of their baggage, and you could resolve that you are only fit to have this
mechanical companion.
Yeah, but he really believes that she returns this affection, and he has no qualms about buying her clothes and taking her out to dinner. And after his first job, he gets her a reluster.
Yeah,
which they treat her skin and
make it more supple and
yeah, he upgrades her companion routines.
Yeah, in quotation marks.
And after it talks about how he upgrades her, it says, after all, what good captain doesn't take care of the whole crew? As if he's such a great fucking captain.
Yeah, you're just upgrading your sex bot.
Not only does he sleep with his mechanic, he sleeps with his sex bot and resigns her to merely clean up after his mess. But he is also an asshole to Elsbeth after she changes completely into a character with a drinking problem. He scolds her constantly.
For being a few minutes late.
Yeah, he's like, you're such a fucking mess, Elsbeth, you fucking drunk. And it's like, dude, you're one to talk. You're fucked in the head, man.
Yeah, stop constantly masturbating with your masturbation toy and upgrading her sexual features.
And so we actually get another character who, again, Simon's philosophy is so twisted. After the first job, he's trying to get more people on his crew. And he's going through the job listings. And he's got a couple candidates. And it talks about how he finds one named Adavo Oredes. It says he's a 30-ish-year-old guy with skin so black Simon couldn't make out details from the photo.
Yeah, that's so... Oh, God.
And I'm just reading this, and I'm like, what is the point of giving us that information? Is it the author's mentality, or are we supposed to think Simon's a fucking idiot? He's such an asshole already towards women, and now he's also bordering on the racism.
It's just such a staple. There's no reason to ever write that unless you're making a joke,
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, things like that, they just have to be ignorant. You're just not aware that that is really racist, or I don't know.
Yeah, And when I was reading this, I was thinking of something like Blade Runner, where you can have a far-flung future where society has broken down and people indulge in their worst traits. Women are objectified, racism is rampant, the economy has broken down, and people's ideas of love and relationship are so warped because society has devolved into this indulgent lifestyle. And you can portray that as, oh man, how sad for a person like Simon, who has to live in this world where relationships are seen as tedious because of all these feelings. And you can have a situation just like that and it'd be fine and we could talk about it and it'd be interesting to analyze. But it's not treated like that at all.
No, it's treated like this is the beast mode, like society, like the best.
Yeah, this is the best thing that has ever happened.
Yeah.
Because talking to real people is a waste of time when you have perfect sex robots.
Who just makes you sandwiches and does everything you say. Also, I wanted to bring up that he's looking for these new applicants, for the ship.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth, who has changed character into this drunken nympho lady, requests that Simon, in a bit of a joking way, but still requests that he gets some sort of boy toy or like someone that she can obviously have mad sex with.
Yeah. She asks him to find me a super hot boy toy as our next crew member.
And sometimes I just wonder, when you're sitting down to write a story, do you ever wonder if the conversation that the characters are having is something that sounds like something that someone might say in real life, Because just imagine telling your boss that you work with that pays you money, hey, find me a coworker that I can bang, yeah? Like, oh.
Yeah.
Why don't you get another one of those sex bots?
And when Elsbeth is having some concerns about our new crew member, Adeo, she complains that he's a priest and that he lives a life of celibacy, so she can't bang him.
Yeah.
And Simon says to her, well, as far as companionship, he may be outstanding at songs, games, stories, gospel discussions, etc. He might be the most enlightening companion you've ever had. Then he put his hand on his own chest, present company excluded, of course. And she groans and she says, men, and stalks off.
Yeah.
And then Simon tells her, be nice to him and be nice to me. Like, Simon is just a fucking asshole constantly.
You only pick this guy because you want to be the only guy on the ship that anyone can bang, Like,
yeah. And he's extremely jealous too. Later in the story, one of their jaunts involves having some passengers on their ship. And Simon dresses up his sex bot in like baggy, unflattering clothes to make sure that no one else is attracted to her.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's so weird. And so after they get a little money, he upgrades Reza and he gets her some clothes and things. He's starting to treat her more like a person, I guess. But then it just goes right back to the objectification. It talks about how he had a really nice night. He hit several stores, got some treats for the ship, and bought some trinkets. He also bought himself some clothes and bought some for Reza. And then, as if to say, like, Simon's he's such a great owner of this sex bot who has no choice but to fuck him whenever he wants and clean up after him and make him sandwiches. As if he's such a great owner. It says, he bought some clothes for Reza. Unlike some companion bot owners, he did keep her clothed. Most of the time. And then she thanks him profusely for his kindness in keeping her clothed. It's such a warped, fucked up situation he has going on here, and the book treats it like the best thing ever.
Oh, yes. There's constant moments where Reza will be doing some actual work or something like that, and she'll, apologize for when they jump out of slip space or whatever one time. Things get knocked about, and she sustains an injury from some unfastened items, and she apologizes for that.
Yeah.
And Simon is whispering because he's very, soft and sensual towards Razor, and he's, are you okay? And how you won't sustain any more damage from this wound? And she says, no, I apologize for not securing all the items in the hold, and, I'm sorry for getting injured. And then Simon whispers, I'll spank you later. Be careful. And
yeah.
There's just never a moment of genuine care or anything like that. It's like, I'll bang you later. Don't worry about it. Like, it's terrible. Oh, yeah, the follow-up message. She messaged his com a few seconds later. I will happily bear the appropriate portions of my anatomy at any appropriate time. This was followed by a wink emoji. Simon smiled at that and got refocused.
Yeah, and then that's the end of the scene. It's fucking weird.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is about the books that we seem to be reading, but this...
Yeah, we don't pick these on purpose. We're not looking for, like, rampant sexism and racism.
I know!
We pick these books because we're like, oh, this will probably be a silly sci-fi story with some dumb writing and silly encounters.
Hopefully some funny moments.
And then it turns into this, like, weird...
sexual fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Of course it's unrealistic because it's a sex bot and she has to do everything he says, but then it's like all these lines like she says, yes, Simon, I've been a very bad girl. Like it's so cringy.
Yeah, because like we said, it's not treated like, oh, the seedy society and the breakdown of genuine emotion and affection. It's more like, oh, the author is like, oh, fuck yeah, like this is so hot. It would be so awesome to have a sex bot who's dirty. And...
oh yeah, fuck yeah. My sex bot, yeah, fuck.
It's really weird.
So, yeah, there's no character development. I mean, I guess that Elizabeth stops drinking so much, but, like, not really from any massive change. It's just that Simon shouts at her for being a few minutes late, and then she just doesn't drink so much.
Yeah, the characters develop in reverse in the story. Like, at the start of the story, Elsbeth is just sort of, well, she's been divorced and maybe she thinks relationships don't work out, so she's a bit of a straight shooter now. And by the end of the story, at fucking Simon and his sexbot's wedding, because of course he proposes to her at some point.
Yeah.
It talks about how Elsbeth danced with everyone there. She danced with his nephew and his uncles and...
yeah, and everyone just comes to this wedding and it's just like, oh, you're marrying your fucking masturbation toy. Awesome.
Yeah, and everyone's cool with it. And Reza's half of the attendants are like the mechanics at the sex robot manufacturing facility.
Oh my god. And then Elizabeth also has her sex bot now.
Yeah. The main theme of this story, to finish on, is that it's preferable to have a subservient, mindless sex toy than a genuine, real connection with someone.
Yeah. Elizabeth is introducing this sex bot, and he's called Peter, to Captain Simon, and Peter says, Captain, I am a QT companion service robot with a strength enhancement. I have some program skills in mechanics and cargo handling, because of course Elizabeth is going to continue working for Simon, and she's going to bring along her companion, so he has to do something other than just fuck her, right?
Yeah.
So he can do some cargo handling and mechanics, and then he says, well, you'll be most helpful, and then Elizabeth says, that's not the best part. Peter, take off your shirt. It's so, like, perverse.
Yeah, and then Peter, without embarrassment, reveals his heavily muscled chest, his big arms, and a washboard stomach.
Oh.
And then Elsbeth proceeds to run her hand down his chest and continue saying, he's real easy to look at, in all caps. He's hung like a horse, can literally stay hard all night long if I want him to, and he has a tongue like a dog lapping up a river. And then she winks at Reza and says, you know what I mean? And in response, Reza is like, oh, you know it, girlfriend.
And then Reza looks at Simon and then very slowly and very sexily rolls her tongue over her lips. They're just like fanatic nymphobots.
Yeah. So Elsbeth's character development is to devolve from
a relatively normal person
and making fun of Simon, as she should, for basically having a talking masturbation toy. But now she's like, oh no, Simon, you're a fucking genius.
Yeah.
Why would I ever spend time getting to know a real person? Because she talks about how when she was at their wedding, she meets one of the sex robot manufacturers who invites her to the factory, and she was very impressed with what she saw. She found what she liked with all the right options and went for it. And it's just like, oh yeah, customize your fuck toy to whatever specifications you want.
Yeah.
And the very last paragraph in this story, after Elsbeth is laughing, she says, Simon, we're the wave of the future. Doing this relationship thing with another human, with their own problems, phobias, and hang-ups, is just too hard. At least for people like us. This is the way to go. Way of the future. And then Simon says, well, I'm not sure humanity can survive that. He wraps his arms around Reza's waist. But it's dang sure all I want.
That end.
And that's the end!
Let's fuck our robots. Let's fuck our robots. Nothing else matters. Humanity is fucking destroyed. Like, it's just, there's nothing else that matters. Fuck the robots. Like,
and that's why we're focusing so much on this aspect of the story, because the actual Jaunts of the Mantis,
they don't matter. They're just routine. That's just his job.
They're just set dressing so that Simon can be on a spaceship and have his fuck toy at all times.
Yeah.
And yeah, in the meantime, they go on a couple adventures. There's like they find some lifeboats out in space, and they get like a claim on the salvage, and it makes them very wealthy. And there's a couple like we said, just very routine missions in space where nothing really happens.
Yeah.
There's no real conflict.
There's a murder, an apparent murder on the ship. They're ferrying some people, as a routine job, and they open one of the rooms and they find that someone's had their stomach stabbed and their wrists slit.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, who could it be? Who done it?
And then we laboriously go through them thinking about who everyone it could have been. And you're thinking, oh, maybe it was Elsbeth.
Yeah, or maybe Razor's gone,
Yeah, the sex bot is going to malfunction and go and kill someone, and we're going to see some conflict, and he's going to have to compromise and give up her.
Yeah.
No, none of that happens.
No. They just try to figure it out, get to the station where they come out of slip space, and he just hands the case off to the detectives, and then that's it.
Yeah, he hands in the report and says, you deal with it.
Yeah. As
long as I'm not legally liable, I'll just continue as I was, and then we never find out what happened.
No. That's the end of that. So it just seems like another story where he is and what he is doing is just an excuse to get to the fantasy sex.
Yeah.
And at least in this, the sex isn't actually described. I mean, there's a little bit of description, near the end. They're talking about how hard the sex bot's dick is and all this shit, but at least we don't get the sex scenes fully described.
Or there's Simon pinching the buttocks of Reza.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. But at least it's not described in graphical detail. I mean, we are given some ideas, like when he has his big windfall of cash from the salvage operation, he gets Reza's breasts enhanced and her hair recolored. And
it's so superficial and so insane. I just, oh, yes. I got the money. Time to enhance my sex bot. Increase her tits. Increase them.
And I think the worst part for me is that Reza's dialogue to him is constantly just oh, thank you, Simon. You're such a great owner of me. I'm so happy to serve you and fuck you and do everything you want and be your slave. It's so creepy and so strange.
Yeah.
And the stranger part for me is the foreword of this book, where the author thanks his wife for reading this book so many times and looking for proofreading errors, which she didn't do a great job. There's fucking
tons of errors.
Yeah, the book is riddled with spelling errors, words missing.
Oh, your favorite things, yeah. They come as the status quo, basically.
Yeah, and this book is also... There's so many times where the dialogue is capitalized, for emphasis instead of italicized. I mean, okay, I guess that's a stylized thing. Characters, Elsbeth constantly says BTW, by the way, but it's all in caps.
Yeah.
And there's even a section of the book where the character is censored. As in, instead of saying what the fuck, they say, what the, and then it's a bunch of percent signs.
Yeah, which is strange. And frankly, it's a really weird thing to have all this weird sex stuff and creepy behavior and then have him not swear.
Yeah, oh, I can't swear in my own book.
Yeah. A taxing book. I did really enjoy the deplorable nature of it's such a just Like, it's just jerking off my own idea, you know? It really is like, oh yeah, I want a sex bot, you know? That's all this is. And while I did find that entertaining, the book story is a shell. It's just such a... nothing happens.
Yeah, it's so boring. I found myself actually skipping through some pages because, again, like we said, a lot of it is either info dumps about shit you've seen 1,000 times in sci-fi, or it's Simon giving a report on a scene you just saw, which is just going through exactly what you just read, or like just going through how long it takes for this piece of shit spaceship they have to do anything. Yeah. I noted down their first jaunt. Here's how long it takes them to get anything done, okay? First, it takes 19 hours for them to get to the jump point. Then it takes 8 hours until they're leaving the jump point. 14 hours to the skimming point. 1 hour watching the filtration system. 11 hours to the next jump point. 17 hours to 1G Byrne. 5 hours waiting in orbit. 3 hours until deployment of their satellite. 4 to 6 hours to fix mechanical arm on the ship. 7 hours until they move to the planet's moon. 17 hours to the next jump point. 16 hours to 1G Byrne. 20 hours to summarize them doing the same thing at another gas giant and then jumping again. They spend 12 hours on a station and then 12 hours in orbit.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just goes through every single moment in all of those hours, and
every sandwich Razor brings up to the crew, every time he goes and visits her in bed, every time,
He'll just be like having a conversation with Elsbeth, and then he'll say, I need some stress relief, and grab Razor by the hand.
Go and pump his loads into it again. Like, it's so fucking weird. Don't announce it. I am going to fuck my sex bot. Like,
yeah, and there's some weird undertones about this other member of the crew, the black guy. He's like always like, he's this weird religious guy, and he's very critical of his lifestyle, and it's one of those books where you read it and you get the idea that it's just a vessel for the author's philosophy to be explained in a narrative form. He's got some ideas about the world and people, and he just wants everyone to enjoy them.
Yeah.
Well, we enjoyed it, but not for the reasons he intended, probably.
I also hated a lot of it.
Yeah. When you read something like this, I'm reading through like these scenes with Reza, and I'm laughing because it's ridiculous, but I'm also getting fucking angry.
Yeah.
That a character is written like this and it's treated like, man, this is so awesome. Wouldn't society be so much better if women were just sex bots to be used for our own pleasure and nothing else?
Yeah. I read something like this and I want to send messages out to all the people that are writing stories. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care how bad it is. Just write a story. Just write like someone has to deal with a problem, learns something, and gets something out of it, and changes for the better or for the worse. Just some sort of, but not just bagging your sex bot.
Give me some character development. Give me some conflicts. Find ways to resolve them that are interesting. But no, not the stuff we read.
My favorite quote from Razor: Simon, I'm not actually a woman, nor technically a member of your crew. Good, so I can abuse you.
Oh my god. So that's Jaunts of the Mantis.
Now, don't read it. I'm going to save you.
Don't read it.
Don't read it. I'll tell you if there's a book you should read. This is not one of them. And now, hopefully, our next book will be better. And what is that?
Yeah, the next book we're going to read is called... It's called Depth of Reality Unknown.
Oh. Do you want to give us a synopsis on it?
Well, I wish I could, but the synopsis of this book is just the first paragraph that appears in the story. And I can't really tell what it's about, to be honest, because it's very confusing. So we're setting ourselves up for another Sword Immortal Online type of story, except this one doesn't seem to be a weird translation, because we looked at the author's other books and they all seem to be normal by some definition.
Well, if you stretch the definition of normal...
and that the words in the sentences flow together, but those words are still completely asinine.
Yeah.
So we're going to read that, and it should be fun.
And hopefully Hopefully there are no sex bots. I think I'm done. If I next time we see a book that has sex bot in the synopsis, we should take a fucking big pause on that, maybe, because I don't think I can handle another masturbation fantasy. They wear you down. These stories wear you down. They make you think, why is this happening? Why do people?
But the sex bots don't get worn down. They just get upgrades.
No. Oh my god.
Thank you everyone for listening and supporting the show. And please, if you can, support us on Patreon, and doubly so, share our podcast with your friends. It's a huge help, and thank you to all of those who already do that. If you have a book you want us to look at, share it with us on one of our platforms and we'll consider it for the show. Thanks!